anytime.com.
Okay, so פותחים בכבוד אכסניה. First of all, the Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Wolkin Shlita, that he's really leading the community over here so beautifully. I like to give a Chazak uvaruch for those that made this available, for the Chazak, Rabbi Meirov Shlita, and also the Torah Anytime, Rav Reuven Kol Yaakov, and Rav Shimon also behind the scene. He's not here, but he's always here. And I'd like to tell you about the new service that Torah Anytime has, and that is instant minute halacha. Daily dose halacha. If anybody wants to join, they'll send you a daily halacha. The phone number to text is 929-355-4268. Again, 929-355-4268. You just text add me and you'll be added and you'll get a daily dose of halacha. I'd like to tell you a little bit about a problem that needs to be, that people should know about. People should be aware of when they go to eat shawarma. One of the foods that people eat and like to go out and enjoy is a meal of shawarma. You put shawarma in a pita and a lafa. Very enjoyable. There's few issues with that. I like to point them. One of the issues is, you know that the shawarma is made out of either turkey or chicken. And on top of that, that is what usually they're made of. And on top of that, they put a piece of fat, either from lamb or cow, a piece of fat on top. Sometimes they put it also in the middle. And the purpose for that is that it should give flavor, should keep it moist. We run into an issue over here. Why? Because we have a problem, Sfaradim. Who eat shawarma normally? Sfaradim. The vast majority is not Ashkenazim, Sfaradim. When you have such a thing, you have an issue of Bet Yosef. Right? Meat, basar, Bet Yosef. Now the chicken itself, the turkey itself, you don't have a problem of Bet Yosef. But when we're dealing with the fat on top, the fat in the middle, we have an issue of Isur of having basar, Bet Yosef. Now just to give you a quick review, the Bet Yosef is obligating us to eat a lung that is completely clean. What does that mean? There's different trefot that the Mishnah mentions in Chulin, Perek Shlishi, Elu Trefot, and those trefot have various different problems that cause an animal to die within a year. One of those problems is the re'ah. If the re'ah has a hole, that re'ah is taref and the animal is not allowed to be consumed. Now, when you have sircha on top of that re'ah, on top of the lung, that indicates that this lung is not a good lung. It's taref. What's a sircha? Machloket Rashi and Tosfot. Sircha is like a gooey gum-looking thing that sits on top of the re'ah. It's connected between the walls of the re'ah or the re'ah and the ribs. What happens is, there's machloket over here. Rashi says that there was a hole in the lung already, and naturally, the lung healed itself by like putting that gooey thing on top of it. It's like you have a flat tire, so you go to the flat tire shop, and they put you a plug over there. That's the way the lung heals itself. Now, so if that's the case, what's the problem? The Isur is only if it's not going to live a year. This way, it healed itself, it's all good. Rashi says, no, it eventually will fall off, and you're not going to have that gum, that gooey thing, that sircha on top of the lung, and therefore, such a thing is indeed taref. Tosfot argues on Rashi, and he says that the Isur of sircha is not because there was a hole, rather the lung itself builds up sirchot on top of it, and the problem with that eventually that sircha falls off, and it takes a bite out of the sircha as well. When it falls off, it takes also a piece of the sircha, of the re'ah. The sircha that builds on it takes a piece of the re'ah. It will cause to have a hole in the lung, and anything that will happen was considered halachically already as it was done. And therefore, that animal is taref. Now, there's a machloket, Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, how you're allowed to eat those animals that have sirchot in the re'ah. According to Shulchan Aruch, he brings a Rashba, it's considered kemachil trefot leIsrael. It has to be clean from sirchot. And the Rama has a little bit more leniencies with either mishush, miuch. But we're talking now a Sephardic halacha. This re'ah needs to be completely clean. If you don't have it completely clean, you have an issue that it kemachil trefot leIsrael. Now, when you go to buy Bet Yosef, that's fine. That means that the lung was clean. And there's levels of cleanness of how much it needs to be cleaned by different ashgachot. Some say that it doesn't need to be completely clean. Most of the ashgachot would allow, if not all of them, what we call spider webs, kurei kavish, which is very minor sirchot that you can remove very easily with the hand, nothing happens. It seems like the Shulchan Aruch says that when you pull the sircha, also part of the lung has to be pulled up with it. Like when you pull a hair, part of the hand will come up with it. That's already a sircha that could be problematic. Others want to be more explaining the pshat in the Shulchan Aruch in different ways, but however you want to take it, that would be still under that various understanding of what Bet Yosef is, because the Shulchan Aruch himself didn't give a clear understanding of what it means. But that's for a different discussion. Anybody that wants, I have shiurim explaining that as well. Well, I want to know that issue that we're dealing with right now, and that is the shawarma. Shawarma, you go to eat shawarma, and on top of that shawarma, you feel that everything is safe with that shawarma because it's not meat, but there is a piece of meat on top. There's a piece of fat on top, and that draws into and leaks into the meat itself, and therefore the chicken itself, the turkey itself, and therefore you're eating that as well. A fat of meat has the same din as the meat itself. How are you allowed to eat that? So you might say that, wait a minute, maybe it doesn't have that much that's going into the meat because it only drips. And it's not like you have a piece of fat inside your pita. No, let's say you ask without fat. You go to the shawarma, you ask them, I want a piece of, I want shawarma without any fat. So you might say that it's batel. What is it? It's just dripping into the meat. So that drop that falls into your chicken is not enough to have a isur. It's batel. But that is not true, because the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Tzadik Chet Seif Dalet says, איסור שנתבשל עם היתר, אפילו מכירו והוא שלם וזרקו, צריך 60 כנגד כל האיסור. מפני שאיננו יודעים כמה יצא ממנו. Which means, let's say you have soup, kosher soup, and a piece of taref fell in that soup, and you recognize it right away, and you remove the entire piece out, you still have to measure 60 times against that piece. Why? חכמים ומשווה מידותיהם. They said that we consider it as the whole piece of isur got dissolved in the soup. That's the way we look at it. And we can't be mekel saying 1 minute on how much already fell in there. I removed the whole thing, maybe 1%, 2%, 5%. We don't calculate it like that. In Ilchot Ta'arovot, Ilchot Isur ve'eter, we calculate the whole thing. You have the whole thing over here. You have the isur. You remove the whole isur. You still have to calculate the whole thing. Let's say
This is from the flip. That's the shayla.
it goes in there.
You have on the outside, you see it.
It gives flavor. There's no question. It goes in there. That's a person. Even if there's an isur on top, and you have a piece of chicken on the bottom. Now, I asked the shawarma store not to give me any fat. It still has to be calculated chicken against the whole shuman, against the whole fat on top. Now, you might say, you know what? It's very hard to calculate. So maybe when it's hard to calculate, one should be mekel. Maybe we can consider such a thing, a isur de Rabbanan. You'll say that by isur de Rabbanan, you could be mekel. Maybe there is 60, maybe there isn't. I asked somebody, one of my friends that had a shawarma store, and I asked him, is there 60 times that fat, the chicken against the fat? This question took him by surprise. He couldn't answer. Yes, no, he wasn't sure. Now, what do you do when you're not sure? Can you say that it's safek lekula? Now, is this isur de Rabbanan or isur de Oraita when we're dealing with Bet Yosef? Bet Yosef, we explained before that we're dealing with the isur de Oraita of sirchot, right? This is how the Rav Pe'alim, the Ben Ish Chai, brings down. He says that all these things are deoraita. Chacham Ovadia, in Yabiya Omer Chelek Yud, brings down this Ben Ish Chai in Rav Pe'alim, a question that somebody that sold by mistake trefot, and he came to ask for Darkei Tshuva from the Ben Ish Chai, and he told him that it's all Isurim Doraita. That's what he told him. Chacham Ovadia says, no, it's not necessarily Isurim Doraita. The Isur of Sirchot, we don't take that so simple to be right away Isur Doraita. What's the proof? He brings a Pri Chadash. A Pri Chadash says that although the Gemara brings such a thing, that Sirchot is Asur, but afterwards the Poskim in the Shulchan Aruch brought a lot of different Chumrot that we took upon ourselves. So when we come out to the question of Sirchot, there's majority that are just Chumrot. And therefore we don't look at it as a Isur Doraita. How does he prove that? That's a Pri Chadash. For Chacham Ovadia brings from that beautifully, how can you drink milk? You know that if we hold that you can't eat meat, unless that small percentage that's called Bet Yosef, and you have to look for it, it's mamash a small percentage of meat that is Bet Yosef. So the simple question is, so how do you drink milk? Kol hayotzeh min hatameh tameh. If the meat is not kosher, you hold that only very small percentage is kosher as Bet Yosef. So also the milk you shouldn't be allowed to drink. How are we allowed to drink milk? How are you allowed to eat cheese? How are you allowed to eat anything dairy? That's the question that Chacham Ovadia presents over there in Chelek Yud. He has it also in other simanim, in other Sfarim. And he says that Pri Chadash. This Pri Chadash, and you have to understand, the question really is a very, very good question, because when you have milk, it's worse than meat. Meat, you say, you know what? There's a small percentage. So maybe I hit it right. I hit it on the nose. I got the Bet Yosef out of the small percentage. But in milk, you can't say that. Because the milk is not only milked from one cow and given to you on the table. It's mixed with so many different milks that come from different cows. So all these things are mixed up. And you have over here, for sure, milk that's not Bet Yosef. How could you eat that? So says Chacham Ovadia, with this Pri Chadash, that we hold that majority of the Chumrot that we took upon ourselves are not Deoraita, and it's not even Chumrot Miderabanan, it's Chumrot. Because of that, says Chacham Ovadia, that one could be lenient using the Chazakah, that the animal is kasher, unless you know otherwise, unless you shech the animals and you see otherwise, then you can't eat it anymore. So if that is the case, maybe we'll say that we can measure, come back to our question, maybe we can measure, I don't know, if the 60, there's no 60 over here. You have a fat on top, you have the chicken on the bottom. It's more or less, looks like there is maybe 60, maybe not, very hard to calculate. Can you be lenient with that? Maybe you said, it's Isur Derabanan, you be lenient. That's how it's brought down in the beginning of Tzadik Chet, in Ilchot Tarovot. But Shulchan Aruch says not. And this is what the Shulchan Aruch writes in Tzadik Chet Seif Gimel. He says, Isur shenitaref be'eter, ve'u lefanenu, ve'i efshar la'amod al shiuro. You can't calculate how much is Asur, how much is Mutar. If there's 60, there's no 60. Aval shehu mi'isurim shel divreihem, Asur. Even though it's only Isur Derabanan, it's still Asur. Why? It's considered, as the Shach and the Taz call, Safek Shotim, which means if the Safek comes from ignorance, I can't calculate. It's not that it's not possible to calculate. It's possible. If the owner wants, he could calculate. If there's an ability to calculate. Since there is such an ability, it's called Safek Shotim. It's Safek from ignorance. Safek from ignorance, even in such a thing, would be Asur. Even if it would be Safek midivreihem, it's still Asur. So it comes out that we have over here a little bit of a problem. How can you eat that piece that of shawarma that has in it the tam that falls down from the fat? The truth of the matter is that you could find some leniencies bedochak with a lot of sfekot. And this is what we have to rely on. But be'etzem, before I explain that, I think the Ashgachot should make sure that whenever such stores buy the fat to put on top of the shawarma, they should buy it, Bet Yosef. Now, could be that you could rely on a Sfeik Sfeika. Chacham Ovadia has a Sfeik Sfeika on the Bet Yosef itself. He says like this. He says that let's say you are a guest by somebody. Let's say you go to a wedding. Let's say you go to a bar mitzvah. And they serve you a piece of meat. you're supposed to find out is it Bet Yosef or not. Says Chacham Ovadia, there is a leniency over here called the Sfek Sfeka. What's the Sfek Sfeka? Safek, maybe it is Bet Yosef, maybe not. On the tzad that it's not Bet Yosef, maybe we can rely on the Rema. That's called the Sfek Sfeka. Again, one Safek is you have piece of meat. Do you know that it's not Bet Yosef? You don't know. So it's Safek, maybe yes, maybe no. On the tzad that it's not, maybe we can rely on the Rema. Can you be metzaref the Rema for a Sfek Sfeka? Chacham Ovadia holds, yes. It's a big machloket in the poskim. You know, the Ashkenazim also have such a thing. Pri Megadim brings down in Kuf Yud that you can't be metzaref the Shulchan Aruch for a Sfek Sfeka. That's for the Ashkenazim. Which means when the Rema says something, that is the halacha. And even for a Sfek Sfeka, you can't be metzaref the Shulchan Aruch. This is how he brings down. Aruch HaShulchan argues on him. He says, no. Why not? Shulchan Aruch is also a posek. You could be metzaref such a thing for a Sfek Sfeka. And this is what Chacham Ovadia also holds the other way. The Rema, you could also be metzaref for a Sfek Sfeka against the Shulchan Aruch. If you take a look at the psak itself, just when you have one Safek, Chacham Ovadia says you look at things as vadai, not as safek. What the Shulchan Aruch was posek is betorat vadaut. You know, that's a machloket, big machloket in the poskim. Or Letzion says that it's always that the Shulchan Aruch made psharot between the poskim, so it becomes a safek leaning towards that psak. But according to the Shulchan Aruch, it's betorat vadai. And because it's betorat vadai, lichora, you can't be metzaref for a Sfek Sfeka. And Chacham Ovadia still always metzaref the Rema or other poskim against the Shulchan Aruch for a Sfek Sfeka. How is that done? There's a Sefer Kol Torah, psakim that they trying to defend the psakim of Chacham Ovadia. You know, when Chacham Ovadia was alive, he was under constant attack from different Talmidei Chachamim on his psakim. That one of the questions that I attacked him on. They said head on. What he's saying that you, in one hand, that you go like the Bet Yosef, Betorat Vadai, and when it's good for you to be Mitzaref for Sfek Sfeka, it becomes a Safek. How could that be? So this is the way they explain it over here, that Be'etzem, when it's one psak, you look at it Betorat Vadai, but when you have another Safek, you could be Mitzaref that to a Sfek Sfeka. If that is the case, I said today could be that it doesn't exist anymore. That's Sfek Sfeka. Why? Because today, the way the shlechtos, the butcher houses work, is that automatically they separate Bet Yosef from not Bet Yosef, since there's a high demand for Bet Yosef. The Sephardi world wants to eat Bet Yosef. So whenever they see a Bet Yosef, right away they separate. So when you go to a store and you buy meat that is not Bet Yosef, it doesn't say on it Bet Yosef, you can pretty much be sure it's not Bet Yosef. It's not a safek that Chacham Ovadia wanted to call a safek. Although, let's say, there's a small chance, that would be considered a safek according to Chacham Ovadia. You know that's also a machloket in the poskim. When you say sfek sfeka, do you need to have each safek from the sfek sfeka safek shakul? Poskim Ashkenazim go with that all the way, the shach, the Pri Megadim, that in Chot sfek sfeka, it needs to be safek shakul. Chacham Ovadia held that it doesn't need to be safek shakul, which means each safek has to be like almost 50-50 to yes and no. But let's say you have 80% that it's no good, and 20% that it is good, so you don't go when you don't call this a safek to be mitzaref as sfek sfeka. Chacham Ovadia says that according to Shulchan Aruch, you could do such a sfek sfeka even though it's not a safek shakul, which means it's majority chances that it's asur. Where does he get this from? In Siman Kuf Tzadik, when the Shulchan Aruch brings out the din of ktamim, which means a woman that sees a ketem, she becomes tameh. Says the Kesef Mishneh, why she's tameh? There's a sfek sfeka over here. Maybe it's from inside, maybe not. And even if it's from inside, maybe it's a wound. So you have a sfek sfeka to be mekel. Says the Taz, it's not a sfek sfeka. It's not a good sfek sfeka. Why? He says because majority chances that when dam comes, it comes from inside. It doesn't come from outside. And because of that, it's only one safek. Maybe wound, maybe not. Ketem is asur. But says Chacham Ovadia, I see that the Kesef Mishneh didn't go with the answer of the Taz, which means even if there is majority chance that it is asur, it's from inside, still it's considered sfek sfeka. Kesef Mishneh asks a question, sfek sfeka. He has to find other answers, but not the answer of the Taz that says that majority chances that it's no good, that it comes from inside. Comes Chacham Ovadia says sfek sfeka could be even majority asur. But over here, when we're dealing with basar b'chalav, when we're dealing with basar Bet Yosef, there's not even a small chance that you're getting Bet Yosef. Because that Bet Yosef, since there's a high demand, they right away separate this for the Sfaradim. That's all. So when you buy meat, you don't have that. But could be that when we're dealing with shawarma, it's not so. It's not so. Why? Because what are you buying? You're buying piece of chicken, you're buying piece of turkey that has fat on top. The fat, there's no demand at all in the stores. You don't go to the store in the supermarket and you have a bag of fat that Sfaradim wants to buy. Bet Yosef fat. Fat is not something that people buy. So it could be, since there's no demand for it, could be that what they're getting is such fat, yes.
The Rav said that when they do the shechita, they right away separate the whole animal. So the stomach, the fat goes with that animal.
No, there's a lot of animals over there. It's not one animal that they do and that's it. Bet Shechita has over there, the Shlechtos has a lot of animals.
Where do they get this fat? I'm saying, we're saying that this is a
so let's say you have 5% Bet Yosef in that slaughterhouse, 5%. So they cut off the whole thing. The Bet Yosef they put on one side, the sell for Sfaradim. But the fat that is left,
that is set aside separately.
Set aside. That
fat can be from both types of cows. And mainly you have the side.
Right. I said that when you buy meat that says on it Bet Yosef, if it says on it Bet Yosef, there's different companies that sell Bet Yosef. Even if you feel that the standard of Bet Yosef over there, it's not the highest standard, but could be since you could use a sveka, that is something to rely on. That's what I said in the shiur on the Bet Yosef, besides the fact that there are minhagim in different places by Sfaradim that didn't have the problem of Bet Yosef altogether, which means they weren't makpid. Cham over there brings it himself in Yabia Omer. Different places that didn't have minhag to keep the basar Bet Yosef. So you have leniencies over here. If that's the case, over here you'll have few leniencies. What are they? Maybe it's a sveka as I mentioned right now. Together with that, you can add that safek that I mentioned before. Maybe there is shishim, maybe not. But even if there is shishim, you say, but 1 minute, it's avid letama. There's a din of avid letama. Means to say that the Rema brings down anything that's avid letama, which means it comes to give you flavor. It's in Siman Tzadik Chet, Seif Chet, says the Rema, Isur anoten ta'am bakdera. Even let's say there is 60. You calculate to see, it's a small piece, all good. I'm eating shawarma, no problem, right? There's 200 against that fat. Says the Rema, Isur anoten ta'am bakdera, afilu be'elef lo batel, kol zman shemargishim ta'amo. They put it to feel the taste. If you feel the taste, so the Chamer doesn't say, but the Poskim don't say that there's a Machloket Shulchan Aruch in the Rema over here. It seems like the Mechaber would agree with that. So he says, the Rema, ending the Rema words, Lachen melach v'tavlin nedvarim David eletama, enam betelim b'shishim. If you have something... So they put it for Tama. What they put it for? That's what they put it for. They put it for flavor. So maybe you should say that it's asur regardless, even if there is shishim, it should be without that safek. At least we knocked off one safek. We left maybe with the sveka without the third safek. But that is not true. Why not? Because the Taz says in there, right there by that Rema, he says that the Isur ve'eter katav, davar ana'asa letam ketzad. What is something that came for flavor? Kol davar charif, kigon tavlin ve'melach shel ekdesh lo batil. How do you have salt that's asur? Salt is asur if you have salt of ekdesh. Tavlin, spices of ekdesh, spices of davar asur, that is lo batil. Why? It's spicy. Says the Taz from the Isur ve'eter, על כוחך משמע דלא מקרא טעם בזה, אלא דבר חריף ולא שומן. What's considered midi David letama? Something that comes from a flavor? Only something spicy and not something like fat. The אף שגם הוא מתאים המאכל וממתיקו, although it also gives you flavor, it makes it sweetens the meat, it's still permitted. מכל מקום אין נרגש כל כך כמו דבר חריף, על כן שפיר בטל, כמו כל האיסורים בכל גוונה. But you might ask a question, 1 minute. That is all true. And maybe you could allow it. But how you could be mevatel isur lechatchila? There's a isur over here that they put over there. And since there's a isur that they put, they're doing a isur. They're not allowed to do that. And since they don't allow it, since they don't, so we'll see. So since they are violating a isur, it's not asur only for them to do that. It's also asur for them to eat it, as the Shulchan Aruch brings down. And it's also asur for us to eat it as well, because the Rabbi Akiva Eiger says that whoever is mevatel something to sell, it becomes a sur for the person that's consuming it and buying it as well. And that Rabbi Akiva Eiger is muskam in halacha. So how am I allowed to buy such a thing? First of all, if this bitul isur lechatchila is isur derabanan or deoraita, we have a machloket rishonim. The Ravid holds it's a isur deraita to be mevatel the isur. When you take a isur, you put it in the eter, it's a isur deoraita. Ran and majority of the rishonim hold it's only isur derabanan. Why am I telling you that? Because it's a nafka mina, says the Aruch HaShulchan. If it's a isur deoraita, so the Rosh Hashiva said that by safek maybe it should be mutar. But says Aruch HaShulchan, if you look at it as isur deoraita, like the Ravid says, so it becomes a safek isur deoraita, it's not allowed to be mevatel. But since a majority of the Rishonim hold, like the Ran, which is only isur derabanan, to be mevatel isur, so in a safek you could be makel. And this is how. Oh, that's another. Shakach. Very good. So this is how the Aruch HaShulchan brings down, but many poskim bring down that even if isur to be mevatel is a deoraita, still in safek you could be mekel. This is how the Pritoar brings down in Tzadik Tet Hey. This is how the Knesset HaGdolah brings down in Agaot Atur, in Siman Tzadik Tet Tet Zayin, and many achronim bring like that as well. Yes, Rabbi.
Could we say that the guy who's putting that fat on top of the shawarma is?
Oh, that's the second thing. Very good. The what? The Shulchan Aruch says, I'll tell you. Shulchan Aruch says, bitlo b'shogeg mutar. Now, the person that's putting it over there is less than a shogeg. Less than a shogeg. Why? Because the Taz brings over there, Machloket Taz and the Tur, right there in Siman Tzadik Chet. What is considered a person that's to'eh badin? He doesn't know the law. Or
Shaygig is on the putter, but the mashgiach.
But that it's lit, even for the mashgiach, it's to'eh badin. The Taz hold that is called a shogeg. The person that
becomes a tayyib badin. So havlei lulmai.
Let me exactly. Since it's Ashkenazim, the mashgiach usually is Ashkenazi, and even if it's not Ashkenazi, the ashgacha usually is Ashkenazit. So they put it over there. They hold that it's mutar, even if they call it worse than that. To'eh badin is shogeg. B'shogeg, the Shulchan Aruch says that bitlo b'shogeg mutar. Not only that, the Prima Gadim in Orach Chaim Tav Kuftet says that davar shemutar b'diavad, you're allowed lechatchila to be mevatel. Over here it's mutar b'diavad. We just said a lot of sfekot. Since there's a lot of sfekot, Chacham Ovadia would say b'diavad you can eat it, right? You go to you go to a hall and you want to eat. So should you go to the mashgiach say, can you tell me if this meat is Bet Yosef? Says Chacham Ovadia, you don't have to be mevarer a sfek sfeka. By the way, it's machloket in the shach, in Ilchot sfek sfeka. You have a shach that's being machloket, the Rashba and the Re'ah. Shach is posek lechatchila, you should be mevarer. If it's hard, you don't have to. Chacham Ovadia holds that according to the Shulchan Aruch, you don't have to be mevarer at all. According to that, don't have to go and ask. Over here also, Chacham Ovadia would say, if it's done already, b'diavad, can you eat it? Yes. So do be mevatel, says the Prima Gadim, you're allowed, even lechatchila. I want to tell.
If you have to walk into a store. This time you're eating by somebody, so you're going. But to walk into a store,
right.
way to go there.
Right. So there is such Avnei Nezer that says that whenever you want to buy something, it's like you did it with your hand. I just want in the little bit time that we have, I want to take you to a different sugya in shawarma.
You say Meiredik, but you said so gewaldig.
The roof is here. I want to bring you to another problem that has to do with shawarma. Again, there are leniencies in that, as we saw over here. I'm not saying one shouldn't buy shawarma and shouldn't eat shawarma. You could eat shawarma, but nafka mina that, it's called the power of consuming. If you go to the mashgiach or the ashgacha and tell them, we want Bet Yosef, put the fat on top, Bet Yosef. It doesn't cost more. The fat is basically cheap. So put it Bet Yosef. They'll listen to you. They'll do it. Second problem that there is, and that's a known problem, especially in Eretz Yisrael, the Sfarim speak about this in length, is the question of bishul akum. What's a bishul akum? You know that the way they prepare this meat, they put the piece of meat on top of the shawarma on the stick, and it's completely raw. Now, it could be that the Jew turns on, and he does, as the Ashkenazi Ashgachot ask you to have the Jew turn on the fire. But Sfaradim hold, la halacha, it's not enough to turn on the fire, but rather you have to put on the food on top of the fire. Or you can do something else. If the fire is not on, and let's say it's a heavy thing, so the goy wants to put the shawarma on the place, because it's heavy, a Jew is not going to put it, then afterwards, a Jew can turn on the fire, and that is also fine, as long as it was finalized by a Jew. But you can't do that the Jew would turn on the fire, and then the Goy would put the shawarma there. For Ashkenazim, it's fine. For Sfaradim, it's not. Shulchan Aruch, Machloket, Shulchan Aruch, and the Rama. The problem here is even if, let's say, the Jew put it on, or the Jew turned on the fire, and it's all good. Who's cutting the chicken constantly? Who's shaving it? The Goy, the Mexican that works behind the counter, he's shaving it. What happens? Behind that piece, it's completely wrong. Can you be matir such a thing? So this, we really have a Shulchan Aruch that says, Niach Israel al gabe gechalim o memot. This is Kuf Yud Gimel, Yored De'ah Kuf Yud Gimel Sif Yud. Niach Israel al gabe gechalim o memot. You take meat and you put it on ashes that are dying. שלא היה ראוי להתבשל עליהם, but you can't, it doesn't have the ability to cook. כמאכל בן דורסאי, the ability to cook is כמאכל, but once it's מאכל בן דורסאי, it's permitted. מאכל בן דורסאי, it's either third or half, מחלוקת ראשונים. So, if that what happens is that the Jew puts it on, but he doesn't have the ability to cook even כמאכל בן דורסאי, ובעקום והפך באסור, becomes אסור. So over here, when the first piece, let's say, of chicken that was cooked, when a Jew put it on, that's all good. But then, the layers behind that, you come in to eat in the afternoon, it's already been cooked and shaved by the Goy. How are you allowed to eat such a thing? Now you need to know that we could maybe find leniencies. What are the leniencies? The Rama argues. If you want to go with the Rama, again, we're going with the Rama, but the problem is, this shawarma is for Sfaradim more than Ashkenazim. It's out of every 9 Sfaradim, 1 Ashkenazi walks into a shawarma. They're busy eating the kugel and the other thing, and the pizza. They're not eating shawarma. So, it says here in the Rama, in Kuf Yud Gimel Vav, ואפילו לא היה מתבשל בלא סיוע עקום מותר. says
בתורה עזרה איתך על הבדיחות, אני...
אפילו... ואפילו לא היה מתבשל ולא סיוע עקום מותר, says the Rama. Which means if we would cook without the Jew, if you would not cook without the Goy help, it's permitted. This is how the Rama learns la halacha. Although it's against Gemara, open Gemara, it's a question of the Shach and the Taz right there. The Shach and the Taz say, the Gemara says not like that. The Shulchan Aruch words is the words of the Gemara. If a Jew puts it on and it's not going to be able to cook, and then the Goy finalizes it, he makes it cook, he brings it to Ben Dosain on, such a thing should not be permitted. That's a Gemara. Says the Taz and the Shach, they try to answer up for the Rama. One of the answers they say is that could be the Gemara was Choser. One answer is like the Yerushalmi. Regardless, the Rama says that even a kesam would be enough. You put over there just a stick and it helps the fire. That's enough. Regardless, there is a Rama to rely on. But could be that over here you have a little bit more, because there is a Pri Chadash. And this is also how the Aruch HaShulchan learns. Aruch HaShulchan learns for Ashkenazim, but Pri Chadash is one of the main Sfaradi poskim that say there's a difference between if the Goy picks it up from the fire and puts it back on, or he just flips it. Many times you go to eat in a restaurant, you go to eat in a place like that they prepare you on the fire. So ask the Jew to put it on the fire for you. It's called Shomer Shabbat, Shomer Shabbos. They right away know. Shomer Shabbos means you want the mashgiach, you want a Jew to put the food on the fire. But what does that going to help? As soon as he puts it on the fire, the Goy comes and he flips it around on top of that grill. So what does that help? The answer is, says the Pri Chadash, that as long as he didn't pick it up, he didn't take it out of the fire, that is still considered Bishul Israel, and that is permitted. That's how the Aruch HaShulchan brings down. This is how the Pri Chadash says. So over here also, we could argue maybe that since it's there already and he didn't yet get to Ben Dorsai, but he never took it out, that's permitted. That is only good if it doesn't have such a shawarma. They have such a shawarma that they pull out the shawarma completely from the fire when they want to shave it, and then they put it back. When they put it back, is mamash niach et hakdera al ha'esh. That could be a little bit harder to be matir. But there is a machloket, Rav Halperin and the Binyanav. The Binyanav is who? Rav Bakshi Doron Shlita. They argue maybe by hasarat hamonea that's not asur, which means the goy doesn't put it on the fire if you don't have that stick that goes in and out. Rather, it just shaves it. It's just hasarat hamonea. Let's say Rav Halperin wanted to say that can you have a fire push it, a Jew would start the fire on the shawarma, and there would be a block whenever a goy wants that it should get cooked, because sometimes you don't have customers, you don't want it to burn, so he just removes that block. That could be permitted because he's not putting it on he's not making an act of putting it on a fire. This is how we said Rav Halperin. Rav Bakshi Doron Shlita argued, he said no, in Bishul Israel it doesn't have a din of ma'aseh. He just, who caused it to cook? Not the din ma'aseh. But also in Sefer Atkinu Sudata he brings such a thing that if it's done even begrama, that's not a isur of Bishul Akum. So these are tzdadim to be metzaref for kulot if one has to rely on such a thing. Also, you know that the Shulchan Aruch tells you a very practical answer, din that we have to see if that's nogea to us. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Kufid Gimel Sif Hey says the following: Akum shebishel velo nitkaven lebishul mutar. If a goy cooks, but he didn't have intentions to cook, it's permitted. Ketzad? Akum she'etzit urba gam kedei la'avir ha'chatzir v'nitbashlu bo chagavim, הרי אלו mutarim. Let's say you have over here a yard with grain. So a goy puts on the grain on fire. He wants to burn the grain. It's a Jewish grain, he wants to burn the Jewish grain. He's a terrorist, right? That's it, right? They throw the afifon from Gaza, it lands on Otef Gaza, and it makes now over here a wildfire. So that's what he did. But there were over there chagavim, grasshoppers. They also got cooked from that fire. Can you eat those grasshoppers? Or you'd say, no, it's bishul akum. Since he didn't have that in mind to cook them, all he had in mind is to make a fire. That is something that's not asur under the isur of bishul akum. A second example in the Shulchan Aruch: im charach harosh le'avir ha'se'ar. You have a chicken and you want to burn the feathers. So you put a match to it, it burns the feather. At the same time that it burns the feather, also it cooks the ear. Says the Shulchan Aruch, mutar le'echol rashi ha'oznaim shenitzlu b'shat charicha shelo nikaven lebishul. Could be that maybe you would argue and say over here when he shaves, he doesn't try to cook the rest. All he's trying to do is what? Prepare that food for the person that wants to eat. It's going to cook. It's not the same because over here,
the fire wasn't meant for bishul. It's not again.
He didn't put the fire. The Jew turned on.
Fire is not a fire of
But over
it's
here,
not a fire of bishul. It's a fire.
But Rosh Hashiva, who turned on the fire? The Jew.
Again, but it's not a fire of bishul. That's the sugi. The sugi is zelo eshel.
The sugi over here is they didn't have kavana.
The nail is a lo bishul.
It's not bishul because he didn't have kavana.
Melechus machshavas bishul akum. It's a lo sugi shel melechus machshavas. It's a lo.
Yeah, but that's not the sugi. Sugi is the sugi of kavana. If you have kavana to be mevashel, that's isur bishul akum. If you didn't have kavana for bishul, you had a kavana for other things. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. That's what the Gemara says. It's not. Doesn't have to be a esh of bishul. You have to have kavana to be mevashel, or you don't have kavana to be mevashel. Yes. So what we're saying over here that with respect to Rosh Hashiva, that over here, that we over here saying that indeed the goy when he cuts it off, obviously he has also kavana that not only that it should be remove that piece on the sides, but rather to be mevashel inside because that's under his also part of his job. That it should make sure that it cuts it evenly and everything should be cooked also in the end of the day evenly and so on and so forth. So for that, you'll have to rely on some other sfekot that we mentioned, few of the sfekot now here, and some of the sfekot that Chacham Ovadia mentions, which is a sfek that maybe like the Shulchan Aruch, maybe like the Ramai again, that the Ramai is enough for him to turn on the fire. And maybe also we go with the pshat that since the goy works for you, it's like a eved that Shulchan Aruch brings, that a shifcha, that Shulchan Aruch is oser, but since it's a raivet that's mekel, so you have over here another tzad to be mekel, and also maybe because it's bevet Israel, so there is also another safek. So Chacham Ovadia has these tzirufim to be mekel b'makom adchak, that a person, so this basically have over here a lot of sfekot, together with the other sfekot we said, that one should rely on this if there's no choice. In Eretz Yisrael they made a takana in many places by the Hashgachot, that they should turn on and off the fire once in a while. The Mashgiach comes in, turns on and off the fire with the button, and then it becomes, then it's the jutan.
And then you can have a svek on which piece.
And then once he turns it on and off,
And then you can have a svek because each piece. Because he doesn't do every piece.
but he's the one cooking it. But once he turns on the fire, everything is
playing it both ways. So then the bristle of eight.
right. So this is the takana they made because of the binyanav, and you have over here much more to say. I just want to cut this short. Why are we saying this? We're saying this because, in one hand, we have to eat, right? If I'm going to tell you not to eat shawarma, we'll find also a problem of sushi, of bishul akum, because the goy is the one putting the rice on the, so can't eat sushi, and you can't eat this and you can't eat that. So there's a lot of.
In sushi, the goy turns on the rice?
Who puts the rice? You think a Jew puts on the rice?
The fish. The ik is the fish, and maybe there's no bishlakim anywhere.
So the poskim say that there's no bitul in isur bishulakum, which means if you have rice that's nikar, it's not mutar. It's not mutar. And the fish is another din. Right, the fish is another thing. Can you eat fish that is not cooked in the sushi when it's cooked, right? Since maybe today people eat it not cooked, the answer is that the poskim brings down that since still majority of the people eat fish cooked, so it's still a problem of bishulakum. There's a lot what to done. But why am I aware of this? Because at the end of the day, again, we are the consumers, and if we go to the mashgichim and tell them, please do it bishul Israel, can you do it bishul Israel? In the end of the day, that's a power of consuming, and you don't have to rely on all this in and out. Chazak, thank you very much, Rosh Yeshiva.
You've just experienced another Torah class